Okay, assalamu alaikum everybody, and welcome to this talk on principles over processes, creating lasting change in your agile or in your organization with the mindset of agility. For those of you who are listening to this for the first time, my name is Zia Malik. A bit about me: I'm a certified Scrum trainer and a certified enterprise coach with the Scrum Alliance. I've been training and coaching and in various roles within the Agile space since 12 years now, working in quite a few different organizations or industries, should I say, from media and entertainment to fintech organizations, pharmaceutical, insurance, so quite a few different flavors, both early on in my career as mostly a Scrum Master and Scrum coach, but I've also experienced product ownership. And also primarily an enterprise coach working across organizational departments in the traditional sense, bringing them together to think more about their organizational change. And actually, this is where this presentation kind of focuses on. It focuses on, I guess, from a traditional sense, what organizational change means to us in an agile way, and what we understand as what is an agile transformation in the current climate and the current context of the way we work. So principles over processes really talks about this idea of focusing more on our mindset and the way we work. And what I wanted to share with you was this idea of the 10 principles of enterprise agility that myself and some of my colleagues at the Scrum Coaching Retreat created. If you go to this website called the Enterprise Agile Manifesto, so the full URL, I'll just get that for you, is the enterpriseagilemanifesto.org. You should be able to, I should have shared that in the chat. I apologize actually for not doing so. You should be able to get the list of 10 principles and a picture that looks like, that has this vision initially, and a picture of myself and 4 other guys. For anyone who does find it, if you want to share that in the chat for the rest of the group, that will be great. So where did this all start? Well, for a long, long time over the years, as I've been working in organizations, supporting change on many levels, not least as a coach, personal coaching and team coaching in the context of Scrum, if you like, and through the Agile mindset. One of the things I've been really challenged with is how I've seen organizations really take up this mantle for change in terms of the Agile context. So we all want to be Agile, we all want to share kind of new ideas and concepts in terms of what change means to us. But in reality, organizations really with how people really kind of focus on their ability to make sense of Agile number 1 and Scrum number 2. So one of the things that happened in the Scrum Coaching Retreat in Copenhagen a couple of years ago was this idea that Scrum coaching as a concept within organizations was something that isn't or hasn't been really supported or focused on in terms of change. There's been a lot of focus on processes. There's been a lot of focus on frameworks and guidance such as Scrum, or let's say SAFe or scaled frameworks, all based around kind of, while they have good principles, all based around traditional kind of practices. And what I mean by traditional practices is not in the waterfall sense, but in the sense of these practices will make a real difference to us in our ability to invoke change. But there's changes a lot deeper than that. There's a lot of focus on, or there should be more focus on what change actually means from a point of personal change and then organizational change. So a few of us got together, people in the picture. So the vision we came up with, first of all, before I move to the next slide, is for Agile coaches to understand the principles that allow for enterprise agility to flourish. These are the groups of people I work with. The guy on the left, far to my, when you're looking at the screen far left, is Falk Kulne from Germany, and then myself and Michael Kononiko, Craig Pearson, and Tom Reynolds. Tom Reynolds is one of my colleagues in Biliminal. The coaching retreats, if you haven't been to them before, they're very, very good. They are based on this idea that you have 70 or so people within a kind of a retreat style setting. So you come together with lots of ideas and things you want to work on, things that you feel will, I guess, transform the world of work, things that you feel that organizations would benefit from. So the idea is that you have a marketplace initially. So Michael in the middle actually was the one who, consider him the product owner. He was the one that came up with the idea of talking about scaling frameworks and how they fit in organizations. And he was there in the marketplace with many other different people as product owners, and they were trying to recruit people to their cause, to actually work together in that coaching retreat. And what would happen in the coaching retreat was you end up working in a number of sprints, and then so essentially you have a number of sprints. And when you have a number of sprints, at the end of those sprints, you do a review, obviously, and then you work with the remainder of the delegates who have their own outcomes that they want to share with you on how to improve what they're doing. So I saw Michael, he was writing some things on a board about SAFe and other frameworks. And as we got together, Tom, Craig and Falk, they came together afterwards and we formed a team. And we formed a team around this idea of what does enterprise agility mean, or what does being agile in an organization actually mean? And we wanted to move beyond this idea of processes. And I would even include Scrum, even though it's a set of rules and allows you to work with a cadence to deliver value. Ultimately, we were focusing these on this idea that they were a set of, even that's a set of processes that organizations would use in a process style rather than considering a kind of a mindset change, if you like. So we created, behind you, you can see what we'd actually created. This is part of a sprint review. These are the 10 principles of enterprise agility. And the idea is that any coaches, including you guys in organizations, should be in a situation should be in a position to walk into any organization and challenge the organization on these 10 principles, with the idea of working leadership and people across the organization. And if you have these principles, if you have a focus on these principles, you'll be in a better position to invoke lasting change. And what I mean by that is grassroots change. As coaches, what we want, should I say, is to be made redundant. And what I mean by that is we want to be in a position to lead the organization alone, so the organization, the organization itself can flourish on its own without being reliant on you as coaches. And there's this misconception that these coaches come in, or I suppose you could argue that they're consultants in that case, where they sit in organizations for months and months, if not years, trying to help the organization be agile. And the problem is that can't always be the case. Yes, there is some support that is initially needed. There's some learning through doing that the coach perhaps would show, but ultimately it is the organization itself that would develop and grow. So we came up with these 10 principles, and these principles really are for you guys to use, to share. And at the end, what I suggest we do is I'll talk through the principles. The actual original workshop I'd have if you were face-to-face as a big group is quite more interactive, where we do other interactive activities. But I'll talk through these as quickly as I possibly can. And then I'm keen to really, for you to come up with some questions. If you have any questions, it's best to write these down as we go. And what we'll do is we'll talk about, we'll share kind of our feedback. You can share the feedback with me and so on. Okay. I have a small video to show you as well, which is really interesting around one of those clips. Okay. Okay. So moving on. So the first principle is around identifying motives. So the idea with this particular principle even is that what is our purpose as an organization? We often get called into organizations to help them become more agile, usually through leadership or someone in middle management saying that the teams aren't working very well, the teams need some support. And yes, absolutely, there will be some challenges within that team. no doubt, and a number of teams. But that is those will often be symptomatic. There will be challenges that you're experiencing whereby upstream challenges are coming downstream, and you're unable to make sense of the complexity within that team, and ultimately what will happen within those teams won't make sense. So a really small example might be if the product backlog or the vision in the product backlog isn't clear and hasn't been clearly articulated to both the stakeholders and the team, then ultimately what the team will be delivering might not align to that vision. And if that is not checked with the product owner in this case, then there may be some challenges. Now that's all fine. What we're experiencing though, what we often find is that in organizations, the reason for embracing agility is really not clearly understood. It's often leadership that bring us coaches in to help teams, again, help with kind of refining processes, applying frameworks, like agile frameworks like Scrum, and eventually scaling that into maybe SAFe or less or other kind of frameworks. And by the way, I'm not saying that these frameworks, these scaled frameworks aren't useful. They absolutely are. But the context in which they use, I often have a challenge with. And I guess this is what I'm kind of pushing back with you guys as people within organizations who might be using some of these processes and scaling frameworks to think more about the principles. So, on a number of occasions, one notable occasion, there was a senior leadership, a CIO in a insurance company, a pensions company, I should say, that I was coaching in. And I was, this was in the middle of the city of London. So we come to kind of experience how can I say, a very archetypal, a very typical mindset within these kind of financial institutions. That, my own assumption was, okay, I mean, I'm about to go into this organization now, and I know what I'm going to expect, and it's going to be very, very difficult to change their mindset. But I was really pleased when I met the CIO, because the first thing he talked to me about actually was motives, was actually the purpose of the organization. And what he'd done is he'd worked with the board, or at the board level, to infuse and instill the agile mindset in terms of valuing your customers, focusing on speed of delivery to the market, maximizing return on investment through experimenting, all these kind of principles at the board level. So the board, the organization's board or the company board, were well aware of what this change meant. So therefore, in the traditional structural sense, the departments within those spaces also became aware. That's just a small example, but ask yourself, do we really, really understand our purpose for embracing agile ways of working or agility? Okay, so that's what this is about. So as an agile coach, the first thing you could be doing here is actually meeting with HR before you touch any of the teams, before you talk about Scrum or Agile as even a concept. I'm talking big A Agile here. Before you even talk about any of those from a coaching point of view, you talk to the leadership teams about business agility and about this idea of what is their motive for change? Why are they changing, or what is the reason for you being there? And actually, how are they going to make you redundant? Because this is a big task for them. Okay, so moving on, challenging beliefs. So one of the things that came up in our discussion between us in the coaching retreat was this idea that many people in organizations, individuals in organizations who make up the organization itself, obviously, but also make up the culture, right? We are the culture of those organizations, but we have beliefs about ourselves that hold us back, that don't allow us to achieve our potential as human beings within that organizational system. And then ergo, we struggle as an organization to achieve those potentials. So often one of the things that I focus on definitely as a coach in organizations, and where I've had the most success in agile transformations, has been primarily working on this second principle around, for example, if I'm coaching a product owner or a group of Scrum Masters, I'm coaching them around limiting beliefs. I'm coaching them around their fears and their inability to invoke positive and lasting change. this is often a real problem within organizations. So let me give you some science around this. There was a professor, I believe it was Professor Donchin in Michigan University in 1960s, late 60s, I believe. There was a lot of psychologists kind of understand and accept that from this study, that 95% of our mind works in a subconscious way. So that means we make decisions every day, and we make decisions day in, day out about what we choose to do subconsciously. And these are often based on the belief systems that we've created about ourselves. So most children, you might be surprised to learn, by the age of 7, have worked out in their mind a life script, and they will follow that life script through adulthood unless they're challenged about that life script. So let's say someone who is, from a poor family, that, has an education, but a modest education, being an elite in a country, being a minister or a prime minister will not be in their life script, right? But someone who is comes from, let's say, a different family, let's say, is going to the top school in the country, and is surrounded by some of those people, then in their life script, being someone very senior in that country in terms of the political system is likely to be present subconsciously. So therefore, that person in the first example I gave you, that child, will avoid opportunities, from a subconscious point of view, will avoid opportunities that will potentially allow him or her to become someone that they believe they can't. And we do this every day. We do actually do this in our organizations. We will avoid that promotion. We will avoid a conversation. We will avoid meeting certain people because we believe that we will not actually succeed in that space. So there's a lot that coaches can do. And when I say coaches, I'm talking about Scrum Masters. I am talking about Agile coaches as well. I mean sort of this interchangeably, where when you're working with your teams, you're working with people in your organization. Remember, a Scrum Master is an organizational change agent, is a person who should be invoking change within the organization itself. What we should be doing, what we should be focusing on, is this idea that people's limiting beliefs can be challenged, people's limiting beliefs can be nurtured, and actually they can be capable of a lot more. A small example of this to give you is a pharmaceutical I was working with, coaching, particularly a product owner. He himself was, in Germany he himself was extremely fearful about his ability to deliver a project, a very, very large project, which had 26 countries as the recipients. He believed he would fail. That was his starting gambit, his starting approach with me, because this project had been twice implemented by other people and it had failed miserably. This was the first time this project was being delivered in an agile way. Now, apart from all the other kind of a structure that we put in place around coaching or around training, for example, even with Scrum or kind of Kanban systems or Agile principles themselves, one of the key things that really succeeded or allowed that project to succeed was his belief in himself that he could be the best product owner in that space. And actually, this is what he exactly showed. And through coaching him personally on one level, and also from a team coaching perspective, to build his confidence up, 3 years in now, they've been iteratively, incrementally delivering value all the way through those countries, and they are coming to the end now of that very large kind of delivery. But think about yourself. One of the things I leave with you in this space on this particular slide is think about yourself and your beliefs about you and what you might avoid and what has shaped you. These beliefs actually come from our parents, our guardians, our experiences as children, and we form our understanding about our world and ourselves in it. So, think about what might hold you back, basically, and how you might improve yourself and challenge yourself to be better within that organizational system. These are quite straightforward. This one focusing on your customer. So we strive for high quality creations, bettering the lives of our customers. It is kind of quite obvious and quite factual now that what we have in organizations now, very successful organizations, is this idea that customers come first. And we've heard this quite a lot. But customers, when we talk about customers, we actually talk about, or what I'm talking about here is, as a coach, understanding how to connect the business with their customers, how to connect the roles within that organization with their customers, internal or external, and actually allowing them to create techniques and approaches that focus on value and focus on ultimate return on investment for them, which is part of the fourth principle as well. So the fourth principle as well, which I kind of marry together, talks about this idea of aligning in value. We believe value creation is at the heart of our existence. So value for those people who need it most and who need it fast. And ultimately, when it comes to being entrepreneurial, so both principles, kind of 3 and 4, focus on this idea of being entrepreneurial and being this idea, understanding how, having this idea of what is actually possible. Has anyone heard of Stuart Butterfield, or someone called Stuart Butterfield? So Stuart Butterfield, I suspect that might have been the answer. Stuart Butterfield was someone who essentially had an idea to create a game. The only thing that Stuart Butterfield has ever wanted to do, from my understanding of reading about Stuart Butterfield, is that he wanted to create a computer game. So he had this passion and this vision of creating a computer game. So when he actually started, this idea of creating a game. He launched the game quite a few years ago now. I think this was possibly in kind of the early 2000s. He wanted to create an online game. Actually, that was a key thing. And he was passionate about this game. So he created a game. And when he launched the game, he found the game wasn't particularly successful. But what was successful was this idea of some kind of file sharing app within the game, this idea of sharing information and sharing images and so on and so forth. So although his passion was really about the game, what he did was something that most organizations don't do. He aligned around what the customers wanted. He aligned around what value that he was delivering to those customers. And he focused more on the actual file sharing part of that game. And he kind of ignored the game. Now, his gut told him not to ignore the game because he wanted to do that, but actually that was his passion, but actually that's ultimately what he did. That application eventually became Flickr. Now, some of you may or may not remember, in the early 2000s, Flickr was a very, very popular photo file sharing. It's probably one of the first that I remember that was very, very successful. And that was bought, I believe, or acquired. So Ludicorp, which was his company, was acquired by Yahoo, and he did very well from this. And then essentially he found in 2009, he found a new company called TinySpec, and what he wanted to do was he wanted to create a game called Glitch. So this time he had more funds, he had the ability and focus and experience from the first round and from the first time. And actually what he did was he created the game, but when he created the game, a similar kind of thing happened. The messaging system, the game was actually quite good. It was quite a well assumed game, but the messaging system in that game was something that really started to take off, and they found that people were using the messaging system more than playing the game. And this actually eventually became Slack. So has anyone here used Slack?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so Slack is what essentially came out of it. So what kind of this means is that Stuart Butterfield has become very good at creating messaging systems and potentially corporate messaging systems and file sharing systems. What he's not very good at doing is creating computer games. But he's the challenge with Stuart Butterfield, or the concept of what Stuart Butterfield is doing, is that most organizations would not have this kind of mindset. What they would do is they'd end up just focusing on, we said we're going to create a game, that's what we're going to do. And this is part of the problem. The problem is that in the complex environment we live in today, in the complex industry that we have today, we can't just assume or accept the fact that we can only focus on one thing. And the thing that we are, as in, you know, if we have an idea, this is the only idea that we are going to do. Brexit is one of those ideas. Brexit is Brexit. We've made a decision, and we're going to leave the EU. People kind of challenge this one as well. But what things are emerging from that idea? What are we learning from that, from our customers? And actually, ultimately, what is it that we can support our customers with in terms of aligning around value and ensuring that our customers get the best quality creations from us that better their lives? And many organizations are using these concepts now. They're using this idea of pivoting. So focusing on what is valuable and what is not valuable, and focusing on what, you know, what's valuable more, okay? So that's sort of 3 and 4, aligning around values, focusing on customer, aligning around values. The 5th one is around emergence for lasting change. So this one talks about we will create an environment to foster meaningful and lasting change. This particular one is an interesting one. This is about mental models, and this touches a little bit around the limiting beliefs concept that we have. So what, you know, what are our limiting beliefs, and what do we consider is stuck in our mind, is fixed in our mind, and what can we do to help change ourselves? So these are things around mental models and what models we hold. And until we change those mental models within ourselves and ultimately within our organizations, we're not really going to be agile or actually embrace business agility and be relevant in our organizations and in the industry. If you'll afford me some time, I'm going to show you a very short clip. What I'd like you to do is watch this clip. It's a video clip from a program in the UK which is very popular called Britain's Got Talent. You're probably familiar with similar kind of formats in your country as well, because it's quite a successful format. What I'd like you to do is focus on a couple of things. I'd like you to focus on the reaction of the people and the audience before, and then the reaction at the end. The lady who is going to be presented, Susan Boyle, she became very, very famous in the UK. So there'll be some singing in between, but I'll kind of, when she starts, I'll fast forward that and I'll move over to the reactions, okay? So hopefully this should work. If you can't hear it or anything, please message me and I'll restart it, okay? So I'll ask some questions at the end of this video.
Hi, what's your name, darling?
My name is Susan Boyle.
Okay, Susan, and where are you from?
I am from Blackburn near Bathgate, West Lothian.
It's a big town.
It's a sort of collection of, villages. That's a thing there.
And how old are you, Susan?
I am 47. And that's just one side of me.
Okay, what's the dream?
I'm trying to be a professional singer.
And why hasn't it worked out so far, Susan?
I've never been given the chance before, but here's hoping it will change.
Okay, and who would you like to be as successful as?
Elaine Page.
Elaine
Like
Page. What are you going to sing tonight?
I'm going to sing I Dreamed a Dream from the Miserables.
Okay, big song.
Yeah? Yeah.
I dreamed a dream in time gone by.
Did you? No.
When dreams are made and used and wasted,
Just going to forward it a little bit, just the last part.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan Peers. Without a doubt, that was the biggest surprise I have had in 3 years on this show. When you stood there with that cheeky grin and said, I want to be like Elaine Page, everyone was laughing at you. No one is laughing now. That was stunning, an incredible performance. I'm really from shock about you two. But
I am so thrilled because I know that everybody was against you. I honestly think that we were all being very cynical, and I think that's the biggest wake-up call ever. And I just want to say that it was a complete privilege listening to that. It was instant brilliant.
I knew the minute you walked out on that stage that we were going to hear something extraordinary, and I was right. Not a lot of time. Susan, you are a little tiger, aren't you?
I don't know about that.
You are. Okay, no and the truth. Here's yes or no. The biggest yes I have ever given anyone. Amanda?
Yes, definitely. Brilliant.
Susan Boyle, you can go back to the village with your head held high. It's 3 yeses.
Okay, we'll leave Suzanne Boyle there. So interestingly, hopefully you all heard that, and there's a really interesting kind of learning from this. But I'm interested to hear from you guys in terms of what you learned, or what did you notice? The question to you guys: what did you notice between the point of when she walked on? So this is the crowd and the panel when she walked on compared to after she stopped singing.
The perception of audience changed, and she became more confident.
I think she didn't. She wasn't expecting anything. She just walked away.
Yeah, that's interesting. So on one level, there's 2 things here actually. Focusing on her herself, she didn't actually believe in herself, funnily enough, that she was very surprised at the feedback that she was getting because she's so used to kind of a certain type of reception. What kind of reception is she used to, or was she used to, if you think about the audience when she first walked on?
Okay, not acceptance.
Right. So people weren't accepting her for who she was, number one, absolutely. Anything else?
People actually had a vision created around his appearance. So I think that was one thing that I noticed.
Yep. So definitely the appearance as well, right? So here's the thing. So someone walks on stage, she doesn't look like she should be able to sing. So just bear that in mind for a moment. She shouldn't look like she should be able to sing. That's a really bizarre statement when you think about it, because what you're saying is someone has to look a certain way, right? This is kind of how we're conditioned from TV media, that someone has to look a certain way to be able to sing. And actually, when she came on stage, she was mildly annoying to the people, and the people found her mildly annoying, and they were laughing at her, right? There were a lot of people who were ridiculing her and actually making fun of her, right? And we've seen this, I'm sure you've seen this as well in various shows over there, and we see it a lot here, right? It's this kind of, someone should be a certain way. That's the mental model that we've created, or subconsciously or otherwise we've created in this context, or the audience has created. But of course, when she opens her mouth and she starts singing, what do you see the audience do? Did you notice what was happening in the audience? Even the panel as well.
Shocked.
Shock, spot on. So shock was one thing that was. So what does shock do? What were people doing because of that shock? What reactions were they showing?
Excited.
So there's an element of excitement. Yeah. What else?
Perhaps they were too early to judge someone.
Yeah, so there was a thought that could have gone on to say, actually, wow, I've been proven wrong here, right? And I was too early to judge. But also, you notice some of the panel were opening their mouths in shock, right? So they were physically opening their mouths. Many people were crying, if you noticed as well in the audience. These things are all of an impact of your mental model being changed. And what we do in organizations and when we're working with people is that we have a very strong affinity to a particular mental model. We will assume someone is a certain way. We will assume that that person, just because of the way they look, maybe because of the way they speak, maybe because of their experience or what their job is, that they will behave a certain way. And actually, one of the biggest challenges for coaches in organizations is to support the change in this mental model. This idea of, oh, this person is like this, so it must be like this, or this thing is happening, so it must be this one thing. But actually, that's kind of a single loop learning idea, that this person has walked on stage, so they're going to be rubbish. That's what I'm expecting. I'm going to expect this person's going to sing and I'm going to have a good laugh and we're all going to laugh at everyone and everything. And actually, that shouldn't be the case, or that should be the case. That's what's in their mind. But when your mind is challenged and your mental model is being broken, then there is an emotional response that occurs in that space. That is the learning opportunity, and that is something a coach should seize on. And actually, that is what coaches should be supporting on. This idea that there are potentially many options. It doesn't mean that if a scenario is presenting itself in a certain way, that will play out how you believe or perceive it to play out currently within your organization or within that particular context. So we, as coaches, we should be challenging the status quo in organizations, how things work out, or what our beliefs and assumptions on how something should happen, and be open to this opportunity of adjusting and changing the way we work, working with other people that we wouldn't usually work with. So, for example, in one organization, in a pensions organization, I would have very obvious comments passed about people in the business because of the type of roles they did, right? There were very specific types of roles. Oh, they never engage with us. Oh, this will never work because actually they don't care what we do. These may be people in delivery and these kind of roles, talking about those people who are potentially their stakeholders, but bringing them together, getting them to work together and getting them to reflect together actually became something quite interesting for them. It changed their mental model. It had this idea of, actually, I am getting challenged here. So how am I going to deal with this? And is there a possibility that things could eventually change? So when it comes to Chris Agiris is someone who focuses a lot on single and double loop thinking. So it's worth spending some time looking at his work. But really, his concept is that, we have to adjust the way we think. We have to adjust and reflect on our environment in a bit more of a deeper way than just accepting the status quo. And this is something we do in organizations a lot. We just assume something is going to be the way it is because that's always the way it's been. This always happens around here. So we just will do the same thing, not challenging it and not reflecting on how you can improve on it. Learning attitude, number 6. So we are encouraged to connect and grow and to create lifelong learning opportunities. So this idea that by learning continuously, actually, and continuous improvement is something that came up a lot in our conversations when we were talking about these principles. We've all heard of the idea of minimum and maximum, but I'll be interested to know if anyone has heard of the idea of maximal learning, this idea of continual learning. If there's one thing that I've learned working in an agile environment and growing in an agile environment is that you will never know everything. I think that's the kind of journey of life, right? You will never know everything, but you should always be willing to be surprised and willing to learn about new things, and never assume that you know everything in any context. Even if you are a perceived expert in your field, you should, in my humble opinion, never assume to know every single thing, because the amount of things that I learned, having my experience over the number of years, I still feel I have so much more to experience in this environment, especially when it comes to organizational change. And I'm often surprised by people within organizations who I'm coaching, those people who I'm coaching, I'm often surprised by them and their ability to reflect and learn. So one of the things that you know, we tend to do in organizations to support this is this idea of creating learning environments. So, you know, engaging the learning and development team, engaging the Scrum Masters to create on a very small level kind of lunch and learns, or this idea of having data and information available to those who need it, for the Scrum Masters, for them to also kind of impart their knowledge you know, onto the rest of the organization as part of their change agent role, as part of their educator role, actually. So whatever you do in your and there's no how here, right? There's nothing I'm telling you that you must do it this way. What I'm talking to you about is this is a principle that you should uphold, or I would request that you uphold within your organizations, to get people to learn and grow. How you do that? Well, you can come up with inventive ways, right? And if you are coaches working within organizations, get those people to really reflect and learn themselves, and actually create those opportunities and reflect on them, see how much you can improve on those. Moving on, respecting the journey. Really, this is about this idea that our agile journey is not going to be easy. And this is, you know, this goes back to principles over processes. It's not just setting up a bunch of processes. It's not just changing, you know, our way of working from a waterfall approach to an agile approach, such as Scrum, or such as more of a flow-based system like Kanban, or whatever else it might be. These aren't just small process changes. How we behave and how we work with each other is hugely important. And if we acknowledge that first step, then we understand that actually getting better at what we do, mastery itself, is a never-ending journey. Mastery is something called an asymptote. If anyone's not heard of this term, mastery is a line you will never reach in your life, irrespective of what you do. If you're an agilist or a martial arts, you know, kind of enthusiast, you will never reach a line that you will cross that is mastery. So a very interesting book I like is George Leonard's book on mastery, which I've learned a lot from, and this idea of personal mastery as well, which we've heard Daniel Pink talk about, and other people talk about as well. Personal mastery is something that, you know, is part of this never-ending journey, both through learning and through helping others learn. And actually, organizations often we are challenged from leadership and others that, you know, when is this going to end? When are we going to be agile then? When is this going to end? Well, it's never going to end actually. And actually what you will have is you will have this idea of continual development and making mistakes along the way. But the key thing is how you're going to learn from those mistakes and how you're going to get better at what you do, which is super important. So this thing around, you know, we acknowledge the past and embrace the future, our never-ending journey, understanding that as we move forward, we will gain knowledge and face obstacles in discovering and achieving our goals. So this to me is what's the most important thing you should be doing next? What's the most important goal you should be achieving right now? Have you achieved that goal or not? And what's the next goal you aspire to? I mean, I suppose you can apply that to your personal lives, right? So that is something that organizations hugely benefit from. Overcoming inertia through continuous improvement and transparency, we overcome resistance to prosper with no limits. Every step of the way, your brain will tell you, especially if you come from a very kind of strict, stringent waterfall environment, very command and control environment, very hierarchical, power-driven environment, that your mind will always look for shortcuts. Many psychologists understand that the mind, the way neuroscientists understand that your brain looks for shortcuts, right? It's what your brain is good at. What we're doing here, working in an agile way, is rewiring our organizational brain. It's something I use a lot, a term I use a lot in organizations. We are collectively trying to rewire the way we work. We understand what these things are. We understand that we need to deliver quickly. We understand that we need to deliver in high quality and meet our customers' needs. But the way we're doing them is very different. And actually, it's like learning to ride a bike again, right? It's like making your brain learn. You know what you need to do, and you know what the goal is and the outcome is, but you're relearning. And part of that is you end up with a lot of resistance. You'll end up with a lot of people saying to you, this isn't going to work. This is not how we work around here. I don't like the way this is working. Coaches and coaching is super important in this space. And what we want in this situation is we want coaches to support this understanding. I never remember who told me this story, and I cannot attribute this to myself. So this is not my story, but I love this example. And if I ever find out who it is, I will share that with you. One of my, it was narrated to me either in a training class or in a coaching conversation, but an individual, a coach that I've heard of in one organization, what she did was she looked for the people in the organization that were the most vocal and the most against her change, the most resistant to the change that she was trying to support the organization through, which was moving into a more agile environment. So what she would do is she would actually work with them very closely, and she would say to them, you are the person that's going to stand next to me, and every time I say anything, you're going to essentially push back, you're going to resist that change, and we're going to have a debate about it as we go through and apply some of these principles. What invariably happened is that person, when they worked with her, started to realize actually where the value was in some of the changes that they needed to do, and they became the biggest champion. And I've seen this happen in organizations I've worked with. I've seen one individual who was dead against actually something that I was proposing and the business were proposing in terms of their change. And what happened was, all I asked him to do was to blame me. I felt that there was a blame aspect here. And I said to him, if anything goes wrong, you just blame me, okay? You don't need to worry about yourself. I will happily take the blame. 6 months later, when we had a very successful review, or, this was one of many reviews we'd had, but this was a major milestone in our project. He was the one that was in the middle of the room shouting about how great Agile is and shouting about how valuable this way of working was. I hadn't said anything other than just come on the journey with me and free your mind, essentially, and try and learn. And that resistance changed into acceptance and allowed him to develop and grow as an individual. So you will get resistance, but to overcome inertia, you have to find inventive ways to support people. All these principles link, by the way. So this, for example, this is where you can challenge limiting beliefs. This is where you can work with, for example, others in your organization who might struggle with understanding mental models or challenging their own mental models as well about a certain outcome. Okay, so these are very valuable as well. Okay, moving on. We're almost through these now. Number 9 is about human behaviors. So this idea is that people are at the heart of our inspiration. We create experiences in safe environments that allow autonomy to support positive and desired behaviors. This is actually about motivation, ultimately, and about how we can get people within an organization motivated to feel they can invoke positive change. Who here knows how to motivate people? Anyone know? How would you motivate someone?
Well, they're not specific hardcore rules, but there are certain things that employees or resources are actually interested into. One thing is their own growth in terms of technology. So that is one factor that I just push them into stretching their limits and in doing things as an assignments, what they like to do, like just to know of their career path and then take them on that with a sort of plan defined with them, with dedicating some chunk of a time with the ongoing project. That's just one thing.
Okay, that's good.
Active listening, I guess, listening to them and getting them to do the things by supporting them.
Yeah, do you think that's a good one? Yeah. Any others?
Perhaps by giving them a sense of purpose, so they know things they are doing is something that have impact.
Exactly, and all of those things are totally valid. I think that this distills down into a talk that I gave before as well, around the 4 levels of engagement, or focusing on the 4 levels of engagement. The first thing is creating a family, a sense of belonging. If a person does not feel that they have a belonging within your organization, let's say a team, family focus, the ability to be part of something bigger, then you will, they will feel demotivated, especially if they are not accepted within a team, not accepted within a family or group within that organization. So this is why, for example, in Scrum, what I like about Scrum is it does create this sense of a long-standing team, this idea that a group of people who come together will grow together and develop together and actually get better at what they do. So they don't only become predictable to you as an organization, but they within themselves feel much more content and much more focused. So a sense of belonging is really important. Psychological safety, this idea that in that team, in that group, and hence in that organization, they should feel safe to share whatever they like and not feel that they will get pushed back from, or pushback from the team. Criticism is okay, constructive criticism even better. But what we're talking about here is that we don't want them to feel unsafe. Psychological safety is a big thing. If you want to look up Google Aristotle, there was a project that Google delivered, or Google commissioned, and they wanted to find out what makes a great team. And ultimately what came to the top of their list, to their surprise, from the teams that they surveyed, was this idea of psychological safety. The teams wanted to feel safe, and this is a very, very basic human need from a psychological perspective, which is in everybody. Third thing, I think a few of you mentioned this, feeling valued. So I think, was it Khurram you mentioned, or percentage you made, Junaid, you mentioned active listening, and being listened to. If you, people think just give me more money and everything will be fine, and money is a motivator to a certain point, but actually feeling valued is even more so. Someone saying to you, did a really good job, I was really appreciative of what you did, and so on and so forth. These things kind of really make a difference, right? The final thing is being in control, autonomy. So, which is what that principle refers to. This idea of being in control and autonomy is super important. If we have the ability to, as much as possible, manage our own lives and, within the laws of what, our organization, if you like, or even our country, be entrepreneurs, do great things for ourselves and other people, then that will give us a lot of motivation. These are considered the 4 levels of motivation. But if you are not doing these things within your organization, then my opinion is that your people within your organization are not being suitably motivated. And by motivation, I mean they can't wait to get into work to do something amazing, right? And that is a lot of motivation. So Scrum Masters, for example, I would request that they focus on these kind of, or great Scrum Masters would focus on these kinds of principles within people, and then within teams, and then hence within other parts of the organization, to help them become better. So this, going back to that principle, people at the heart of our inspiration. We create experiences and safe environments that allow autonomy to support positive desired behavior. So we want from this people to come up with great ideas to solve problems, not worry about other things that they shouldn't be worried about, right? So what we want in this space is we create provocative change. This idea is that we want people to be so free of thought that they can think of some really interesting ideas about how they can develop and grow. So this idea of maximal learning, and how they can be a bit more provocative with that change, suggest something even better, right? Than we currently have. We are creating connections, so we are building connections in this motivational family, and we are essentially developing lasting human networks. This is one of the most important things I believe that is needed in organizations. We lack these human networks that allow people to self-organize around their problems and deliver real value. This is at the heart, right, of something as simple as Scrum. We very naturally talk about self-organization, self-organizing teams, yet actually applying this as a very basic principle, we really struggle with in organizations, right? So the final principle is coaching sustainability. Something I mentioned right at the beginning, this idea that, me as a coach or myself, I don't want to be in an organization for a long time. Don't get me wrong. something that will be very lucrative for any coach would be to sit in organizations for a very long time, because that is something that means you're working, right, and you're in a job. But actually, this mindset of redundancy is super important for a coach. And often I ask leadership teams, when will you make me redundant? When will I be leaving this organization? Because that's one of the first things I would really like to know. And that doesn't mean that it's going to happen tomorrow or the day after, but what it does mean is that you're encouraging, by asking the question, you're encouraging the organization to have some inbuilt coaching capability. So your Scrum Master. So one of the first things I would do is work closely with Scrum Masters. So as this principle on the most basic level is, anyone who's coaching in an organization, I would request you work with those Scrum Masters to grow them, their internal Scrum Masters, to help those people develop and grow and improve kind of what they're doing. So ultimately, you are allowing them to, have internally within themselves a coaching capability. So this lasting change continues. You as a coach it's not to say that you'll never talk to the organization again. Maybe you're there for initially one day a month, and then every few months you come for a day or two or something like this to see how things are going and to help them steer their organization if needed. But ultimately, in the time that when you're not there, the organization is capable and able to navigate the change that they've created for themselves. And that's the most important thing from any of these principles. So I'm going to give you some things to remember, just to leave you with. I've taken a bit more of your time than I anticipated. So remember that, we have to remember that any type of change, especially when it comes to organizational change, and especially when it comes to big A Agile, concepts around big A Agile, and organizational or business agility with a small a, is difficult. You are rewiring your brain, your organizational brain, your human network. This is something that is really, really important to understand and get your leadership to understand. Meaningful change will only come when you create and take ownership. You have to own this change. No one is going to, even if it's a consultancy coming in or a coach coming in, you as an organization are going to have to take ownership. You're going to have to do something with your own hands to make this change work. And that ownership itself allows you to improve the way you navigate the organization through business agility and agile change. Fail fast and fail safely. Have an experimental mindset, see what works and see what doesn't work, and act on that. Don't continually do things and deliver things that aren't very valuable or aren't supporting you as an individual, as an organization, as a team, or as an organization, in order to be the best that you can be. And all these things ultimately will allow your human networks to flourish. So I'll leave you with one final thing. Anyone heard of the Kung Fu principles?
Are you referring to the Shuhari model, or?
No, I just made these up, so I don't expect you would anyway.
Okay.
These Kung Fu principles, I tested you before, some of you remember the Kung Fu principles. No, this is not Shuhari, but it's similar. This idea of practicing for specific scenarios won't be best place to succeed. So this idea is that I practice martial arts, and one of the things we do here a lot is, how do I defend against this particular thing or this thing, or what would I do in this scenario? And this is what I fear a lot of consultants and coaches will do in organizations. We are setting up organizations just to learn from specific scenarios. And that's all well and good, and you might learn some skills, but actually what you're not doing is you're not actually learning from the deeper principles. This idea of what we ask in our classes is that people really understand the principles, what it means to be a martial artist, what it means to be a person who's embarking on an agile way of working. These principles in general are what allow you to be best placed to deal with any eventuality. Organizations are complex, organizations are challenging places to be. The world is changing now. Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, often mentions concepts like, or ideas like, we are in the fourth industrial revolution. We have AI, financial systems changing, the world being a complex place. All these things are happening on a regular. All these things and lots of other things as well are happening in the world today. And as organizations, we have to be very quick and have very nimble in order to allow allow for change to take place. And that can only happen if we understand the principles, apply the principles, and then create practices ourselves that best suit our current situation, and hopefully be prepared for anything. So that's the end of my presentation to you guys. So I really appreciate you being attentive and listening. Do you have any questions for me? I'm very keen to know what feedback you have and any questions you have on these principles and the talk.
Unfortunately, I missed the first part. So the first 4 points, would there be a possibility like we gonna be getting this recording anyway? And that would be helpful.
Yes, you will be getting that at some point in the future, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Or maybe the slides would help.
Yeah, the slides, I'll share the slides, no problem.
Perfect, thank you. In the group, on the Skype.
Thank you, Zia, for your time. I just want to know that these principles are for big organizations, like where we have capacity of 500 to 1,000 people.
So, sorry, is that Junaid that was speaking?
Yes, it's me, Junaid.
Hi, Junaid. These principles are for any organization. It doesn't matter how big or small your organization is, because your organization will possibly grow if it's small, right? The purpose of these principles is what foundations are you starting with when you're embarking on this agile journey, right? So you might get an organization with 10 or 15 people, let's say a startup, but they might have all the wrong reasons to change, or they might not understand their motive for change or why they want to change, or they might not have an entrepreneurial mindset focusing on the customers. Just applying the Scrum framework and doing iterative and incremental development won't necessarily help them. It will probably to a certain degree, I'd argue, but not to the deeper level that I'm looking for in organizations. So when they do grow eventually, they will have the ability to make a difference.
Okay. One thing we talked about self-organization. Can you share something more about the self-organization?
Well,
like how to make people self-organize?
That's an interesting one, right? You can't, you can certainly guide and support people's understanding of what self-organization is and how it will be a better place to support them. But if someone is, if someone is very strong-minded in their opinion of being given work to do rather than defining their own best working approach, and then that takes time, and one of the things that I found really helps is where, first of all, whatever you do in any setup, in any organization, is that you kick teams off properly. And what I mean by kick teams off is that you engage them through education and learning workshops before they start working together as a team. So one of the things we do in organizations is we suggest a team kickoff. And that might be over 3 days. So the team will work together and not only learn about Agile and Scrum, so they're all on the, for example, if it's Scrum that they're going to be using, and the deeper Agile principles about change. And sometimes we'll talk about motivation and limiting beliefs, these kind of things. But also they will, for example, have workshops where within those 3 days where they will define their designed alliance, or what we might call working agreements. How are they going to behave with teams? So one of those might be this idea of self-organization, and then you can share what that means. And some people will get it in the team very quickly and understand it and work on it. Others will take time. They will just not understand that concept. But if you have the sense of belonging, which we talked about in motivational terms, and that having that team able to support each other, then in that space, that is something very powerful, because that team will ultimately support each other in becoming self-organizing. Right.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So if there are, if you have any other questions you don't want to ask out, on this forum, which is fine, feel free to reach out to me. I think most of you have my details. I'm more than happy to share information.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm Shaheen.
Hi Shaheen, Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Alaikum, how are you? I'm good. What about you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah,
what's your
I just want. Yeah, I just want to ask when you are coming to Pakistan again.
To be decided yet. So I will be, inshallah soon. I will be coming
Okay.
soon, but to be decided. Maybe later on in the year, but nothing is confirmed. I'm just working out some schedules. Schedule because there's other people asking me for other things as well. So it's difficult to keep everyone happy. Thank you, Shane.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this. I will be running this or a version of this at the Scrum Gathering in Vienna. So it will be more workshop based. There's more interactivity all the way through these principles to help understand and apply. But the general premises or the general focus is don't just rely on scaling frameworks to help you through a scaled agile. Think more about business agility, your own agility. And remember that Agile, big A Agile, is a very small cog in a big system. And while it's very useful and there's some great things in those frameworks, change starts with you first. And then, you can support the rest of the organization through it. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, Zia, for your time.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Take care. Inshallah, speak to you soon. Allah Hafiz.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.